All right, looks like it's about that time again. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning for what is our fourth webinar in our COVID series of webinars. So again, my name is Jason Flynn, and I am the Director of Human Resources and Client Services for Prestige Employee Administrators. Along with me this morning again is Carol Sawyer, who is our Tax Manager here at Prestige. Say hello, Carol.
Good morning, everybody.
So we are actually very lucky to have with us today two active members from NAPIO to give us an update on the latest news coming out of Capitol Hill. Andrew Lubash, who has been involved with NAPIO for the past 5 years and is the current chair. Andrew is also the principal of Prestige. So we're very lucky to have him, as well as Tom Stoller, who is the Vice President of Federal Government Affairs at NAPIO. So like I mentioned, we are very, very lucky and happy to have both gentlemen here to help, talk through some things today. So as we go along, Andrew and Tom will be kicking things off this morning with some updates from Washington, D.C. Then Carol is going to take over and provide us with some updates on the Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness calculations. This is something that we've obviously spoken about over the past few weeks here. Then we'll wrap up with an unemployment refresher and reviewing some frequently asked questions. So I will say, as a reminder, all participants will be muted throughout the webinar. However, if you do have a question, I urge you to use the question and answer feature within the webinar and direct your questions to the panelists. We will do our best to answer all the incoming questions. A copy of the presentation will be available in the COVID Resource Center of the Prestige website following the webinar. So at this point, I am happy to introduce Andrew Lubash, who is going to take it from here. Go ahead, Andy.
All right, welcome everybody. Again, as I keep saying every day, these are crazy times. Can't make it up. But again, first I want to wish everyone well and make sure you're safe. Right now, that is the most important thing. That is the priority. And again, I want to just let you all know at Prestige we are here for you. I mean, for the past 5 weeks. We've been working 24/7 to answer any of your questions, to be here. We know how confusing this is, as Tom will mention a little bit later. We've been working pretty diligently on clarifying. As a matter of fact, we just got dropped, I guess, the legislation that was passed by the Senate yesterday, and now we've got to delve through a few hundred pages. So next week's webinar, we can bring you up to speed on what was inside this piece of legislation, and Tom will also bring you, I guess, a little bit of ahead of the news, ahead of the curve information, because he's really plugged in. Again, I guess I picked a great year to be chairman of NAPIO, chairman of the board of directors for the industry. Last year or next year might have been a little bit easier, but there really has been a benefit to our Prestige clients and our affiliates and our prospects and anyone that's works with us, because again, as Tom would know, to quote Hamilton, Michelle Hamilton, we've been in the room where it happens. So again, even though it's been a 24/7, as Tom will tell you, calls with U.S. senators, congressmen, trying to get clarification, trying to understand guidance, along with the industry, with myself, Tom, and Pat Cleary. We hired the former administrator, the chair of the SBA, Hector. So again, he's guiding all of us through as well as Prestige in assisting our clients in applying for the PPP, assisting you with regards to leave, furloughs, credits that are being applied, deferral of Social Security taxes. And again, every day, as Tom will tell you, what keeps happening is that, the Department of Labor or the IRS issues guidance that conflicts with the guidance that they issued the day before. So chaos at its best, and then obviously throw in some partisan politics, and it makes it very difficult for businesses to navigate this, to make sure they get what they're entitled to and that you continue to thrive. And that is, again, what we're here for. Again, I guess the lucky part of it is that we are a bit ahead of most others when it comes to disseminating information. This is our fourth WebEx. And again, we intend to continue to do them as this continues on to make sure, again, that you're getting the latest information and that we're doing everything we can to continue to have your business and your company thrive. I am available, okay, as well. Again, we don't hide. You know, as one of the principals and owners of Prestige, I mean, I'll give you my cell number, 516-680-5021. If you ever need to reach out to me, ask any questions, have any issues, I am here. And I joke with everybody, I only have one cell phone. I don't have two. I don't have one that I answer and one that I don't. Okay, so again, we are here. Tom, who's going to be the next speaker, and he's got a lot more interesting things to say than I do right now. I've been working with for, at least the last 10 years. I mean, I've been involved with NAPIO for the last 20 years, but as Jason mentioned, I was chairman of State Government Affairs for the last 5 years prior to becoming chairman, and again was involved in state legislation and what was happening at the state level. Tom is our federal lobbyist for NAPIO, and I've been working with him since the beginning of time, or since he came on with NAPIO. I do joke with him a bit, but he is plugged in. He knows what's happening. Anything that I ever need or I need to clarify, he can get it. He gets us in touch with the people that matter. So again, if we have a situation or a client has a situation where we need some political influence or we need to get someone on the phone to say, hey, wait a second, this piece of legislation is harming small to medium-sized business, he knows who to call to get us in front of them and say, guys, this is an unintended consequence of what you're doing. You know, you may want to listen to this. And again, the PEO industry, like I said, has grown. I mean, over the last, 40 years since it's been enacted. Clients of ours turn around and say, why wouldn't any small to medium-sized business use a PEO? And again, a lot of times from our clients and our broker channel and our advisors and our accountants that are on this phone, a lot of people have asked you, say, hey, how are you navigating this? And then they say, well, Prestige is helping me. What's Prestige? It's a PEO. What's a PEO? And then we're getting phone calls, so thank you. So before I babble on any longer, again, I want to thank you all. I wish everybody well. Anything I can do to help 24/7. Okay, we are here for you. That is what we do. Okay, and we will leave no stone unturned, and we will do whatever needs to be done to help you succeed and get through this time. All right, so I'm proud to introduce Tom Stoller. I guess, do you guys move the next slide? Tom's picture is a lot better than mine, by the way. Whew. That was before quarantine. Again, as we talked about, Tom I've worked with forever. He is the federal, government affairs specialist, vice president for NAPIO. I call him my favorite federal lobbyist. Again, you can see his bio. He currently serves on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Employee Benefits and Labor Relations Committees, as well as on the SHRM Labor Relations Committee. He has served in the Bush administration as a senior legislative officer and as an acting secretary of occupational safety at OSHA. And if I'm right also, Tom, you were with the DOL for a period of time too, if I'm correct. But Jason, you can put me back on mute. Let's have Tom step in. Again, send the Q&As, excuse me, and we will get to them and try to respond to them on our website or back to you with anything specific. But again, I reiterate, if you need me, we're here, call. Okay, Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Andy. We can go on to the next slide. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for indulging me for this for my presentation. I plan on covering next slide. Just kind of quick overview of what Congress has done, what's currently on the docket, and then where I see things going. That's not me.
Sorry about that.
Are we good?
Can I see?
Yes, we are.
We are good.
Good.
Sorry, Tom. Take it away.
Okay, that's fine. As I was saying, this is what I want to talk about today, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the stuff that's been enacted because you all are living that day to day. To put a little bit more meat on the bones that Andy laid out, I do work for NAPIO. NAPIO is the trade association that represents the PEO industry. There's about 260 PEOs nationwide that belong. Andy is the chair of our board. He really downsold what he does. He is our leader, our volunteer leader this year. And you don't get to do that just by showing up one day and saying you want a job. You put in years of work, you know, in the salt mines of NAPIO to rise to the position. So, in addition, while I represent the PEO industry on Capitol Hill, the PEO industry writ large through NAPIO also tries to make sure that we support legislation that benefits small businesses, because without a healthy small business community, there is no healthy PEO industry. So one of the roles we've had during this crisis has been really pushing for legislation that helps small business, because anything that helps small business by definition is going to help the PEO industry. And we have two incredible law firms that work for us, the Groom Law Group on benefits and health insurance, and Davis and Harmon, which primarily does our tax work. And much of the expertise that has flowed down to your business through Prestige has come through those individuals working there, in addition to the work Prestige has done on their own. So we clearly are a resource helping our members help you comply with the myriad of regs that have fallen upon you in the last month, which, as Andy described, will change on a daily basis. So next slide. So what's been done so far? You know, the first COVID bill, which was more than a month ago, was basically a medical financing bill to get money in for the initial testing and the other shortfalls that the medical community needed funding. The first big bill that impacted you all was the Family First Act. That was the emergency family medical leave plus the sick leave, along with the tax credits to pay for it. And you guys will get in the details of that later, and something you're dealing with now. Then, of course, you had the CARES Act, which had the payroll protection plan loans, the payroll tax deferral, and something that's kind of been overlooked due to the crunch of everything else. Section 127, if those of you are familiar with that, that is a benefit that allows you as an employer to provide up to $5,250 per year to your employees without any tax event, so they can attend college. And it can be any college, community college, four-year college, doctoral or master's degree. Congress expanded those 127 benefits for the year, just for this year, to allow an employer to pay up to $5,250 towards an employee's student loan debt retirement. So in essence, if you're looking for a benefit for an employee to keep them, probably not the best time in the world for that, but once we get back going, if you're looking for something to attract or to keep a good employee, that's something you might want to consider down the road. Next slide, please. So some regulatory actions that were taken, and these are specific to you all. The deferral of the payroll taxes, that's addressed in the CARES Act, and it's also been addressed by Treasury. There are some regulations around that. The regulations make it clear for those of you, since you're all in a PEO relationship, and many of you are in a CPEO relationship, that tax deferral is something that ultimately resides upon you to repay. Normally, that was clarification language to ensure that that there was a clear line of responsibility with that. The other thing that NAPIO spent an enormous amount of time on was the PPP loans. We were very concerned when this passed that the small business clients of PEOs would somehow not be eligible for the loans. We got clarity that that the clients would be counted on their employees, not the total sum of all the PEO employees. But most importantly, we got clarity, and I put that up on the slide so you have it. Many who've applied for the PPP loans have said their banks are asking for 941s to qualify. Well, we have clarity language that if you are a client of a PEO, and you all are, you do not have to provide 941s to prove your payroll for the prior year or whatever time period you're using to apply for the loan. So if your bank says you have to have a 941 to qualify for the loan, that is not true. And you can point out this question from the frequently asked questions off the Treasury website. There's one outstanding item. NAPIO wrote in early and asked for guidance from the Department of Labor for the hardship claims on the EFMLA. Yet to see anything on that. I think they've had so much to do. That's a little bit low on their issue to deal with. So next slide. So what's current? I'm sure many of you have seen in the news that there's legislation moving through Congress. I call shorthanded for COVID 3.5. That would provide an extra $350 billion for the PPP program. There's additional money in there for health. There's some targeted funding for community banks on the PPP, some targeted language to expand access for the loans to what's called underserved or disadvantaged small businesses. That bill passed yesterday by voice vote in the Senate. We're operating under a very weird set of circumstances in Congress. Congress is in session, but the session they're in is only just one or two members in Congress. So in order for anything to happen, bills have to pass by what's called unanimous consent, which means any senator can stand up and say, I object, and the bill can't pass. So that's forcing the folks who are in town, the members of the Senate, to negotiate with each other. The House is under the same pro forma rules, but apparently enough members are going to come back tomorrow, so they'll have a quorum and they'll pass the bill. And that extra funding should be available for PPP loans Friday at the latest. The issue is going to be that money will likely run out quickly, and they'll have to go through this again. What's next? We have been hearing rumblings in the media amongst the lobbying community for a fourth COVID bill, another $2 trillion plus bill. The president has said he would like to see an infrastructure package in there. The problem with that is that each party has a different view of what infrastructure is. And so how that gets negotiated will be interesting. The other interesting development is that Senator McConnell, who's the majority leader in the Senate, has said if there's going to be any more legislation, it will be done with members in town. There is no more negotiating amongst the principals. He wants a full body of Senate in, and he wants them debating bills. So that could delay any bill moving through the Senate. The House Democrats have a priority list of things that have to be in the next bill, or they will not vote for it. So we are a long ways away from a fourth bill, but it's out there and they're debating it, and who knows what's going to happen. The other issue, and this is probably not an issue in Metro New York, but it is around the rest of the country, the states are beginning to reopen. And that's going to be, at some point, the next issue that everyone will have to deal with. How do you reopen? What's the parameters? What are the measurements you're going to use? Those type of issues. So with that, I think that's about all I have, Andy, unless you have, or Jason, there's any questions you guys want to ask me or any additional comments. I believe that's it. Do I have another slide? I don't think so.
Let's see. No, that is it. Tom, thank you so much. You know, again, it's really nice to have Andy and especially you, Tom, to get your insight on everything that's going on the Hill, and to be able to, you know, grace us with that information during this call. So thank you so much for providing us with the time to sit on this call with us today.
Final thing I would add is if there are issues you all are encountering with the banks or with the loans or with the various aid programs, both let Prestige know so they can let me know, and more importantly, write your representative and your senators. You know, send them an email, because if they don't hear there's a problem, they don't act. So it's really important that they know. This is one of those times where, you know, the extra 5 minutes you take just to fire off an email to the Hill or to us could really pay off, because it helps guide what we need to do. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So at this point now, I am going to send it over to Carol Sawyer, who's going to talk to everyone about the Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness calculation update. So, Carol, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jason. Some of you have been lucky enough to start receiving, excuse me, your funds. And so the common question we're hearing is, well, what do I need to do? Well, in principle, you need to spend that money on wages, and 25% of it can go to the other qualified expenses. But everyone wants specifics. How do I know how much is going to be forgiven? So there's two things that affect the forgiveness amount. And the first one has to do with headcount. Once again, I've given you the definition of what the covered period is. It's the first 8 weeks. If you got your loan on Monday, Monday is when your 8-week period started. So the amount of the loan that will be forgiven will be reduced if you've had a drop in the number of employees paid. Think about it. If you borrowed money to pay 10 people and you only paid 8, then the amount that's going to be forgiven will not be the full amount that you borrowed. So how is that determined? Well, the head count in your covered period is an average number of employees per month. So it's going to average the 2 months. So they do understand that there's going to be a delay in getting people called back from unemployment. But it is in your best interest to do that as quickly as possible to raise your average for the 2 months. That average will be compared with the head count in one of the 2 following periods, either February 15th through June 30th, 2019, or January 1st, 2020 through February 29th, 2020, basically before all this hit and business started to slow down. And it picks the 2 periods to recognize that business fluctuates, and what was in 2019 may not have been in 2020. You, as the borrower, get to decide which period you're going to choose. And we're going to have a little math. It is not Common Core math, but it is PPP loan forgiveness math to give you an idea of how this is going to work. So here's an example. I looked at the time period in 2019 and in the time period in 2020. I just looked at the number of employees paid in the month for each of the months, and then determined an average. So for 2019, I have an average of 13, and in 2020, the average was 17. And then I picked numbers for the covered period, gave me a monthly average of 13. This employer will want to pick their 2019 numbers to compare to. If they have an average monthly in their covered period of 13, that is the same as what they had in the test period in 2019. So they're good to go, no reduction in the loan forgiveness based on headcount. Next slide, Jason. This one is an actual client who had started asking the questions, and so I went through their information and did the calculation very similar to the last one, where 2019 is the better period to pick for determining your head count. We are in the process of putting a report together to be able to give you, we don't have it yet, but we will. This I basically did, I just went through the client allocation report, which is something you all have access to. You also know what employees you paid. I was going in cold to these clients to get the numbers, to figure and start to give you an idea of how many people you need on payroll in your covered period to not lose any forgiveness based on headcount. So that wraps up the math. You can all breathe now. We'll move on to some other things. There is also a salary reduction component. The purpose of this is, once again, if you borrowed money based on Susie getting an annual salary of $40,000, but in the covered period, her pay was only based on an annual salary of $20,000, it's going to reduce the forgiveness because you didn't spend as much as what you borrowed. So the first bullet point, it gives the exact letter of the law. It'll be reduced by any reduction in salary that's more than 25%. Well, 25% of what? The most recently full quarter the employee was employed. So that means it will be the wages paid in the first quarter. So that is your baseline for comparison, is their rate of pay January through March of 2020. Now, worrying about rate reduction only matters for people making less than $100,000 annualized, because that's what the loan was capped at. If you had an employee that was making $200,000 a year, when you did the loan calculation, you capped them at $100,000. So if you have an employee that made 200 and coming back now you've reduced them to 125,000, that does not impact the loan forgiveness calculation at all. Anybody making more than 100,000, when you do that 8-week covered period calculation, they're going to be capped to $15,384.61. That's 8 weeks of a $100,000 salary. So that's a big question that we've been hearing a lot about, is how that salary reduction works. And those are the details there for you. Next slide. The forgiveness application process is going to be lender-based. So that means all of you are going to go through something different depending on your bank. I've already seen some of the things that Chase is going to be looking for, and that's going to be an interesting process. Other banks might make it much easier. The CARES Act specifically lists payroll tax returns for proof of payroll. Well, as you know, you're all clients of a PEO. We do not have tax returns that we can give you. We are expecting to get additional guidance, information. We can also fall back on the question and answer that Tom gave during his presentation that specifically states 941s are not required. But we will find out what your bank asks for proof of payroll during the 8 weeks. We do have the payroll register report, which will show the wage amounts that each individual was paid. We will also be able to provide you with a benefit cost report so that you know what portion of your invoice was for the benefits. And the Act also lists for the rent and utilities and everything else that is applicable for that 25% of the loan amount. You're going to need canceled checks, payment receipts, transcripts of your bank account. It's going to depend on your lender. The other point I want to address that's not on a slide, so we'll stay here for a moment, is we've been getting a lot of questions of, should I leave the money in a separate bank account? That's up to you. The money, you will need to show that you spent the money. I understand wanting to keep it separate so there isn't a commingling of funds, as some CPAs have put it. In that case, my suggestion is transfer into your regular account that we draw from as the invoices need to get paid. As you all know, setting up banking with a different bank account can be a long process, and then to only switch it back again. So that's our advice for a best practice. If you want to keep that loan proceeds in a separate account, is then transfer to the account we draw from to fund your payroll on a weekly basis. So that wraps up. Once again, the SBA has until, they said in their original legislation that they would give additional guidance 30 days after the enactment of the legislation. That's April 28th. I don't know if we'll really see anything, but as you learned, we have Tom Stoller in Washington getting all of those details for us as they are available. And now I am done, Jason, and we'll move on to you.
Yes, we have the heavy hitters. Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much. What I wanted to go through with everyone today is a little bit about unemployment. So now, we're really fortunate here at Prestige in that we get a head start on what we feel is important to discuss during these webinars. Yes, we're keeping on top of regulatory changes and updates like everyone is, but we also take direction from our clients through all the discussions that we have on a daily basis. And part of what we're hearing a lot about right now is about unemployment benefits. Now, I know that we've discussed unemployment and everything around it over the past couple webinars, so I'll really just use this as an opportunity to revisit the finer points and talk about some of the topics we are coming across most of the time. So, As it stands, and as we all know by now, the CARES Act expanded unemployment insurance assistance programs through the creation of a pandemic unemployment assistance program. The expansion of the unemployment program connects unemployment insurance compensation and COVID-19 to create the following 3 new programs. First we have the pandemic unemployment assistance. None of this really rolls off the tongue, but we'll use the acronym of PUA for that. But this extends the eligibility for individuals who have traditionally been ineligible for unemployment benefits. This would be your self-employed workers or independent contractors. Then we have the pandemic unemployment compensation. This section provides an additional $600 per week on top of regular benefits to all unemployment insurance recipients. And the third we have is the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, which also provides an additional 13 weeks of unemployment benefits beyond the regular 26 weeks already provided, which would give recipients a total of 39 weeks of coverage. So this all applies for weeks of unemployment, partial unemployment, or inability to work caused by the coronavirus between the dates of January 27th, 2020 and the end of the year, December 31st. And yes, the PUA benefits can be paid retroactively for periods of unemployment beginning on or after January 27th. Of course, there's a lot that's being thrown out at employers on a daily basis from a lot of different directions. Federal laws, state laws, unemployment laws, coronavirus laws, even your own company policies come into play. And I'll be honest, I can understand how it's really hard to know which end is up at most of the time. But as I mentioned earlier, here are some topics that we hear commonly from employers. So the first thing that we've noticed is that employers want to know if employees would be eligible for unemployment assistance if they reduce the employee's salary by a certain percentage, but the employees would continue working their normal full-time schedule. So this really wouldn't qualify an employee for unemployment benefits in this scenario. The New York unemployment rules still state that the employee must work less than 4 days a week and earn 504 days or less in order to receive some type of unemployment benefits. So it's not just as simple as, hey, can I lower everybody's salary and they would get assistance from unemployment because they are truly working full time. Now, the next point that we often hear deals with the understanding of the difference between being out of work for COVID-related health reasons versus being out for, frankly, a lack of work-related reasons. So it's important to distinguish between the two because there are benefits set up for each one. If your organization is operating and an employee is out of work due to coronavirus-related reasons, the employee could be eligible for emergency paid sick leave or emergency FMLA under the FFCRA. Now, this is exactly why those programs were created, and it's to help active workers whose employment is affected by the coronavirus, specifically for health reasons. So, however, if an employee has been terminated or furloughed due to a lack of work or the organization being shut down, then the employee should look to pursue unemployment benefits. Really, though, this would not qualify the employees for paid leave benefits under the FFCRA. Lastly, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And really what I mean by that is that due to the extra benefits that employees are eligible to earn under unemployment, under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, the employee could potentially be in a position to earn more while on unemployment than they would if they returned to their regular job with their regular wage. So let me give you an example of what we could see and what we have seen. Let's say that an organization applies for the Paycheck Protection Program loan. The loan's approved, they received their funds, and now they're ready to recall their employees and restore their operations and really get things moving along. Then they're going to call their employees, and one of them refuses for what we assume to be due to unemployment benefits being greater than their wages. So, the question is, what do we do now? Well, eventually, the end result of an employee not showing up for work would be the termination of said employee. Now, of course, as an employer, you should still go through the appropriate process, lean on company policy for how to deal with job abandonment or a no-call or a no-show situation. But ultimately, if the employee is failing to report to his job, then the employee should be terminated. So the question becomes, would the termination then disqualify the employee for continuing to earn unemployment benefits? And the answer is it depends. And now the employee has a good argument for unemployment benefits to cease for that worker. They offer gainful employment to the worker and they refused. It seems pretty cut and dry. Where things become a bit muddy is if there are state or local stay-at-home orders still in effect, or if it's not clear if the business should open in the first place, it is conceivable that the employee could create a rational argument that they fear for their health and if they were to return to the workplace. So that is something to be aware of. However, if the company is open for business and allowed to operate under state guidelines, then the employer has a stronger argument to rationalize the employee's termination and how it relates to the disqualification of unemployment benefits. So the answer could be, or should be, that if the employee refuses to return to work when recalled by their employer, where stay-at-home orders are lifted and the risk is no longer there, that should disqualify them from receiving unemployment benefits. However, the employer would need to contact the state agency, find the right person to notify of this, and even then, with how inundated the state agency is, it's hard to say if it'll even be acted on. So, all that I've really said to you in this whole point is that it's a tough position to be in. We are hoping that employees understand the value of continuing employment over the short-term bump in pay, but these are really going to be on a case-by-case basis. And, if you did have further questions around those types of scenarios, you should definitely reach out to us and let us help you work through those scenarios here. All right. So what we're going to move on to now is a frequently asked question period that Carol and I are going to take everyone through. So starting off with the first question, can you take part in the FICA deferral program without applying for or receiving a PPP loan?
Yes, you can. The FICA deferral and the PPP loan do have an interacting component to it, but you can do both or one or the other. If you do choose to have your FICA employer match deferred during your loan period, once the loan is forgiven, that deferment will stop. And this is the update that we have, different from the prior webinar that we did. That amount is then payable on the regular schedule in the legislation. So half is due December 31st, 2021, December 31st, 2022.
Great. So next question we have here is, can either choose to defer the FICA tax or apply for payroll retention credit, or can you do both?
You can do both. The FICA deferral will go down a great deal while you have the payroll retention credit. But yes, you can absolutely do both of those at the same time.
Great. Next question we have listed here that we've seen is, if we furlough employees for 7 weeks after getting the loan and then hire them back in week 8, do we still get full loan forgiveness or just forgiveness for the last week?
As I mentioned earlier, it's an average monthly employee count. So if you wait until the last week in your 8-week period, your average monthly employee count is going to be very low because you're going to have 0 for the first month and then we'll say 8 for the second month. So that would give you an average of 4. So you really do need to call these employees back as soon as possible. You borrowed the money to pay all of them. The sooner you pay them, the more forgiveness you will get.
All right, less wordy question for the next one, but still very important. Will Prestige be able to generate a payroll forgiveness report.
Yes, we are working on finalizing a report very similar to the one you received for calculating your loan amount to show the 8-week period for your covered period.
Great. Carol, I'll grab this next question. So the question is, are part-time employees that were laid off that worked less than 20 hours apply for unemployment? So simple answer is part-time employees may apply and they can apply for unemployment. And this is where we really have to lean back on the rules where if you are, in order to file a claim, to be eligible to file a claim, you have to work less than 4 days per week and earn less than $504 in that week, then you can apply. But part-time employees can apply just as much as full-time employees can. And of course, the state is always going to make the final determination on their eligibility. Next question we have is, if you use the permitted 25% of the PPP for operating costs, is that amount forgiven? Or will you owe that amount back with interest?
No, that portion will be forgiven as the rest. The Treasury recognized, or the government recognized as they were writing this, it's not just about paying employees. You have to keep the building open and the lights on. So that's why you're allowed up to 25% of the loan amount. And this is where you would need the canceled checks for your rent payment, the canceled checks, or if you do an ACH out of your bank account for your utilities, to prove those costs.
All right. Next question we have is there a requirement to maintain the same employees, or does the body count have to be the same people?
It does not, and that's why in our calculation I just talked about numbers. I didn't put names on them. Everyone recognizes that there is turnover, and Abigail may have been doing the job last year, and this year Donna's doing it. It has to do with the pay rate for that type of job. Once again, we're not sure how this process is going to shake out. Everyone's situation will be a little bit different. We will help you work with your bank to get the maximum loan forgiveness.
All right. So please explain more fully how a PPP loan intersects with the EIDL with the $10,000 grant.
The way it works, and the way you just need to keep in mind, is the federal government is limiting how much free money they're going to give you. So if you had applied for an EIDL and was given that up to $10,000 forgivable grant, meaning if you borrowed $100,000 on an EIDL, you only had to pay back $90,000. Federal government's looking at it as you already got $10,000. So when you do the forgiveness process for your PPP loan, again, if you had gotten a $100,000 loan for your PPP loan in addition, the maximum forgiveness on that loan will be $90,000 because you've already gotten $10,000 through another program.
All right. So I think these are our last two questions, and I believe I can take these, Carol. So this question that we have on this slide is, am I eligible for the extended unemployment benefits if I have already used all of my unemployment benefits? So yes, the answer to that would be yes. Anyone who's exhausted their 26 weeks of unemployment insurance after July 1st of last year, that's 2019, they would be eligible to receive the additional 13 weeks of unemployment benefits. This is what was set up with the addition of the PUA programs under unemployment benefits to support the COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic. So the last question that we have here is, I have a compromised immune system and I'm concerned about my health because of how many people I work around. Would I be eligible for unemployment benefits if I left my job? So this is another tough one. You know, generally employees are not eligible for unemployment insurance if they voluntarily leave their job. This much I'm pretty sure everybody knows. However, we always suggest that employees communicate with their employer about their concerns. There could be alternatives available to the employees, such as sick leave or requesting a reasonable accommodation, which could be working remotely, among other benefits that are available to employees. But it all starts with communication. However, if there are no options available to the employee, it's possible they could file a claim for unemployment insurance. However, they should certainly maintain any medical documentation that identifies any work restrictions, because that will certainly be called upon. And that wraps up our fourth webinar in these COVID series of webinars. Again, I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to give a special thanks out to Andrew Lubash and Tom Stoller for the information and that they provided with us today, and for participating in the webinar. I do want you to continue to utilize your HRBPs, your payroll specialists, benefits compliance, your Prestige support team. We are here to help you every single day for any questions that you might have. We will continue to send out weekly email updates with information that we feel is useful for everybody to be aware about. And again, we are constantly working on our COVID-19 Resource Center within our website. So please visit our website. The URL is on the link, the link is on the screen that you see right now. And finally, I'd like to remind everybody to utilize the mobile app. It is a direct link to your dedicated support team, so you'll always have the support at your fingertips. Again, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us this morning, and I hope you have a fantastic day.